Hi, I'm Arthur, and this is part 17 in a 20-part series-ish I am doing covering all Star Successor chapters of Space Marines. Basically, we're just talking about the ones that have either the most fanatically obsessed over fans, or are just really important to the setting. Do you need to have seen the other parts to understand this one? No, but it would make me happy, and this one is kind of different in its own way, so who cares? Yeah, I'm doing this a bit differently, because when filling out this list, I had so many extra chapters I could have gone to, but for some reason, I found that they always had very scant lore, not enough to really fill out a full 20 to 30 minute video. I had so many significant chapters, each one with their own specialty, but they would end up having just a single sentence describing them. That being said, I did want to cover them at some point, so I guess it's their time to shine. So, I'm doing a video about the most important chapters of Marines here. That didn't have enough lore to make the cut. Or I could only really discuss them for like maybe 8 minutes if I stretched it and made it annoying. So there is that. In order to make sure I can pay my bills this month, though, let's talk about something we all care about. You guys want to know something weird? My name isn't actually Arthur. I know, plot twist of the century here, but I came up with the name and character of Arthur Bones when I was like 15, and he's been kind of just evolving over time. I did it mostly so that I could keep myself anonymous. It's why I don't really ever use it online. It's Connor, by the way. It's not really that much of a secret anymore. It's genuinely an insane effort to keep myself that private and keep that info private, but Incogni is one of those services I wished existed back when I was in my mid-teens because it would have made me so much less paranoid. They are a service that is actually pretty simple to understand. Whenever you register for an account, access a site, and, click on certain links, sometimes the site takes data of your input or just choices that you put into there and all the information that you store in there, catalogs it before selling it off to marketers or, goodness me, evil hacker wizards. Not a lot of people know this, but it is by law required for companies to adhere to you opting out of the storage of your personal data for online security purposes. But do you know how to request this to a site? Because I don't, because I use Incogni, who will go through the effort for you. It's literally just that simple. So, if you're like me and would like to keep your private stuff private, then use my link, incogni.com/Mr. Bones in the description or pinned comment down below for 60% off the service and secure your internet data with ease. It's genuinely a marvelous service, and I think you'll all agree. Thanks to Incogni for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to it. So starting off, I kind of want to get what I can only best describe as a bit of a dishonorable mention out of the way, because I think I brought them up before, but the Dark Suns, out of dislike for them and their aesthetic alone, I just had to include them. There's not much to know about the Dark Suns. They are a proud, excessively proud successor of the Ultramarines and suspected to be a successor chapter of the Nova Marines, I believe, as well. These individual Marines, the Dark Suns, are known for being incredibly egotistical, kind of assholes all the time, and being a little bit prideful to the point where I'm pretty sure at some point we're going to find out that they were in fact a Slaneshi cult that just sort of happened at one point. I never really liked them, so why do I bring them up? I just think they have the worst paint scheme I've ever seen on a Marine. It looks both difficult to paint and also just not really appealing on the tabletop. It's basically just a worse version of the Sons of Medusa scheme, but also for some reason they have a purple knee pad which throws off the whole balance. They are significant in the fact that, weirdly enough, I think about them a lot. When I think of bad Space Marine chapters, they are the one that I think about, and I wonder how many fans are there out there of the Dark Suns. I have this thing I call the Pokemon theory, where no matter what Pokemon you're looking at, it's someone's favorite. From Quagsire to Dunsparce, everybody has a favorite Pokemon, and it's different. Mine's Krogunk, by the way, because that dude's chill. I look at the Dark Suns, though, and I don't see that. I feel like Space Marine chapters as a whole, everybody has a favorite, and if you look at any chapter, someone chooses them as their chapter to play as, but I don't think I could ever see someone playing a full army of the Dark Suns like they're their favorite chapter. I don't know. I just find that they look funny, their lore is that they're kind of just assholes, and I just wanted to have this throwing shade segment. I promise I won't do this that often. Unless you guys like this, then, I don't know, I'm a slave to the algorithm here. I'll do whatever makes people laugh. On to the first actual one. The Castellans of the Rift. I really like these guys. But to explain them, I have to explain a few other concepts that are a bit weird. Basically, with how the galaxy of the setting is laid out, it is a flat plane where the center is where this great rift is. It's this massive line that divides the entirety of the galaxy into two halves. One side is the part that has Terra, and that's the Imperium Sanctus, and the other half is the part that doesn't have Terra. That's the Imperium Nihilus, and you don't want to go there. It sucks. There's not a lot of supply lines. The Lion is just there bugging out all the time and smashing traitor skulls in, which it's kind of cool if you can see it, but you're very rarely going to survive it. It's very basic stuff. Being cut in half was one of the more unfortunate things to happen to the universe as far as trade routes are concerned, as both sides are necessary for life to proceed as normal, or at least as close to normal as possible. In the 40k setting, it's a very commonly accepted thing that cannibalism is normal here. So crossing the rift to get from one side to the other is insanely difficult because it is a literal wound in reality, a tear in real space that bleeds out warp energy, which on the upside of things means more psychers, which is kind of cool. Librarians, hey, I like librarians, but has the unfortunate byproduct of if you lived near this big ass gaping asshole in the universe, it's pretty shitty. I made it. That was dumb. I'm sorry. I'm in a punny mood today. Basically, demons, possessions, warp entities, a few enslaver, uprisings here and there. You know, the list goes on and on. It's not exactly a pleasant thing to endure, but it is something people have to deal with. Not like you can go just not be there. Crossing this rift is near impossible, as there is only like 2, maybe 3 passageways that you can travel through to get from one side to the other, and you need the right kind of navigators, the right kind of protection, and the right kind of maps to get through them. The most famous, or infamous in this case, is one known as the Nachmund Gauntlet. Known as such as the survival rate is actually pretty low. That being said, Gilliman, in his infinite wisdom, decided to do something that would beef up security in the Nachmund Gauntlet in a way that would help pretty much the entirety of the Imperium. Just put an entire ass Ultramarine successor chapter there and make sure they were fully stocked on whatever war crime plus weapons that they wanted. Thus, the Castellans of the Rift, and they do not have much more lore than that, but what can I say from inference alone here? These guys are probably one of the coolest and concept Marines I've ever seen, and they're probably one of the most trained and battle-hardened Marines in the setting, as they've been around for at least 100 years, judging by them being installed in the earlier parts of the Indomitus Crusade, if memory serves me correctly, and they're still around now. And the fact that they're still around, not corrupted, and in a place where there is nothing but endless warfare, every second of their existence is genuinely hellish. They have to deal with alien raids, demon attacks out of nowhere, cultist uprisings, probably gene stealer cults, and who knows, maybe they have to deal with Hrud. I don't know, do Hrud have to worry about warp energies? Where have they been? What's the Hrud discourse about here? They haven't fallen to chaos yet, and they're still around because they are both too angry and too stubborn to die. By God, they are going to protect any ship that flies the Aquila as it goes through the gauntlet if it's the last thing they do. With a cool-ass paint scheme that shouldn't work, but it does. That's green on green with a white faceplate. I've always considered them one of my personal favorite chapters of Marines just because they have such aura to them. There is only one canon piece of art for them, and it's just one dude taking on an entire army of cultists with his helmet off and screaming at the top of his lungs while he does it. It's genuinely just very cool. I would love to see a book from their perspective, but I feel like it just would be like if a John Wick film was set in hell, which I guess is just a beat for beat way of saying I want it to be like Doom, where every second they are just working their way through a newly cropped up demon world because some agri-world needs to fly by there in order to bring a massive quantity of milk to the other side of the universe, and by the Emperor, the Castellans of the Rift are going to make sure that Commander Dante is gonna have his strawberry mini-wheats with music sprinkled in it, or they will rip the whole rift apart. God, I love these guys. So, with the most recent updates to the lore of a certain alien species, we have had a bit of a nerf to a certain chapter of Marines, so I feel like it's time to give them an update. So, yeah. You guys remember the Iron Lords at all? a chapter that was created as a part of the Sentinel founding. The Iron Lords are a pretty cool chapter of Marines, or at least they were more so before the incident. But to give you an idea of what these dudes are about, basically all the members of the Sentinel founding were a bunch of heavy hitter chapters. You get the Star Phantoms, the Marines Errant, and then you have the Iron Hand successor that decided to keep the same scheme but put on a fresh coat of red pants, and that's the Iron Lords. Each of them were pretty stoic as far as chapters go and had pretty harsh beliefs in comparison to their progenitors, but there was a decent backbone to all of them. Most of them are pretty stable, though I think the Steel Cobras, or whatever they were called, ended up corrupting. The Iron Lords took it upon themselves to go to this place known as the Grendel Stars in the Eastern Fringe. The reason being is there was some pretty hard to deal with alien species over there. I mean, things that were genuinely ferocious and horrid. The main subject of their little crusade was this unknown alien species known as the Bargasi, a race of aliens that at the time we did not know much about. They were described as incredibly violent, unending in their capacity for murder, with tough hide that could block bolt shells, hard and sharp claws, and could fight Space Marines one-on-one in combat with a decent success rate comparatively to everything else in the universe. Cool, right? The Grendel Stars were literally put under a blockade in order to keep them from escaping, and that was the main goal of the Iron Lords, was to keep them from getting out, but also to kind of keep them from getting eaten by Tyranids so that they would get the genetic material for them. This is kind of insane to think about because, well, you guys ever hear about the Clawed Fiend? Yeah, it's a Dark Eldar war beast and gladiatorial beast. It can potentially travel through the warp because we don't know how it keeps appearing in random locations for no reason, and it also immediately upon arriving at these locations becomes the apex predator of any planet it is on due to the sheer level of strength and speed it has. Yet, we haven't really put any of the planets or systems that it's in under, blockade, so the Bargasi must be a problem, right? Well, we found out recently what they are, and they are, dogs. Not even really threatening dogs, too. I mean, the Fenrisian wolves look more dangerous, and I know that the Fenrisian wolves are kind of a higher bar than people like to give them credit for, but you could have made them look a bit scarier, maybe even bigger, or even just kind of angrier looking, but nah, you just kind of have them looking like a dingo. So the reason why I'm especially annoyed at this is because I've seen significantly more dangerous animals with way less threat in other games. It's the aesthetic that I'm mostly concerned about here. So there's this other game that I'm playing that in terms of lore is kind of on a similar, futuristic scale, maybe a little bit more advanced with the nanotech, but whatever. But basically I've been playing Corvus Belli's Infinity recently. It's a fantastic game. Very, very fun. And, there is an argument to be made that it is probably the best skirmish game to have ever existed. I mean, it definitely has the most in-depth combat system I've ever played, and I'm still learning the mechanics, but it's a very fun game, I will state. There's basically mechanics for everything, but I digress. I play a faction known as Ariadna, basically a bunch of the first space settlers who went off into space in order to colonize a planet for Earth, something that they found through a wormhole. Eventually, the wormhole closed behind them and they ended up getting cut off from planet Earth about 100-ish years prior. So when people found them, they had been basically striking out a living on a planet that wanted them dead, with dangerous plants, horrible jungles filled with nothing really viable, and a species that had lived on that planet prior to them arriving there, a Stone Age canine species known as the Antipodes. And they're basically a ferociously violent, uncomfortably smart wolf thing. And the people of Ariadna have found a way to tame them to some degree, which is cool. You can deploy them in small packs on the tabletop, which no one really expects in your really fun sci-fi cyberpunk shooter game to just have a wolf with a giant Stone Age knife coming at you. I love them dearly. But just looking at them, they're violent, they look horrifying, they're gigantic, and they're described as being kind of easily dealt with if calmer heads prevail. Like, you could just shoot them. They're not really armored, and we never had to blockade a planet for them. So with that in perspective, looking at the Bargasi, it just looks kind of runty for something that is supposed to be a galaxy-ending threat. Maybe they just swarm things, but who knows? It just ends up nerfing the reputation of the Iron Lords, if you catch my drift. Okay, so before I get into the next topic, just gotta say, go play Infinity. It's really fun. I'm in their like weird content creator strategy where I just like to promote the game, and I actually just genuinely enjoy it. They've been a blast to work with so far, and I am working on an Infinity video at some point. There's just a lot to read. But also, like, let's talk about the White Consuls next. I actually really like the White Consuls. I've genuinely been a big fan of them since I read about them, I think in the Lords of Silence, and then decided to do a deep dive, but they've been around for as long as the setting has in some capacity. So what is there to say about them except the universe really doesn't like them? I mean, I don't think they're unlucky per se. I just feel like they are prone to overcorrection and miscalculation in a way that makes sense. Like, they're overly logical to the point where they can't really factor in the fact that this is not a logical universe. In simplest terms, due to them suffering a massive loss in a recent campaign of half the chapter, they had recovered almost all of their Marines after 100 or so on years, and then they decided to deploy the whole chapter to a threat that they thought was on, par with it, so they wouldn't have to worry about losing it. Something to help out in the modern day. So, that planet was Cadia during the 13th Black Crusade. I mean, track record aside, Abaddon had not won up until this point, so I can't blame them for doing so, but I just gotta add a quick little womp womp. It does get worse because while their homeworld is undefended due to like 99% of the chapter being gone, they were raided by a vengeful crusade of the Word Bearers and some pretty understanding Death Guard. This led to the whole planet being taken over by the Death Guard and becoming a literal plague world that is kind of unsalvageable unless you glass it and start over. I think in all, maybe 20 Marines were left to reform the White Consuls. Sure, Gilliman helped them out by giving them a bunch of the gray shields that were around, but one of the dudes that survived was actually a guy by the name of Captain Messanius, and I think his model is still available to get. I really like it. He has an Oramite Power Fist that was gifted to him by Gilliman, which, it's kind of a big deal. I don't think many people got one of those, but yeah, big fan of his model. No notes, pretty cool. They are a second founding chapter, and unlike other Cryboy Yellow Poster boys we know that get typecast as the unlucky chapter, they just don't end up really being unlucky. It's more they just make miscalculations because they trust in reality a little too much, realizing that in 40k, reality is very easily subverted. They also trust people too much because they end up in proximity to Call a bit too much, and that usually ends with them being in a bad situation. To go a bit more into the interesting parts about these guys, or at least what they were before they ended up getting exploded on all fronts, they're the only chapter of Marines, to my knowledge and history, to have two chapter masters running at any time. One is the daddy master, who goes out into the field and works for a living. The other is the stay-at-home mom who tends to the chapter's kids and basically makes sure that the new generation of Marines are trained properly, as well as handling orders of state and, the politics of being an Ultramarine successor. They are known for being incredibly organized and defined statesmen. They are literally made to be the image of what Gilliman had in mind for the Ultramarines at the end of the Crusade back in the day, which is cool. They apparently have really good relations with all of the worlds that they work with. Think of them in terms of disposition as somewhere between the Raptors and the Ultramarines, though, where they are very fixated on managing supply lines, making sure that everybody is properly equipped and has the right tools for the job, and they tend to go the easier route when it comes to dealing with enemies rather than, the bull rush charge. And they stick around on these planets after long periods of time to make sure that they grow back to the way they were before. And I think that that's pretty cool. It's very unknown a lot of times when it comes to Space Marines. They'll just show up, bomb a planet, leave, and then let them kind of recover on their own. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, on to the last dudes I wanted to cover. These are going to be weird as they have kind of been around for a while and one of the coolest converted Marines in history, but they've kind of disappeared in the zeitgeist, so I kind of want to see if I can bring them back. So, let's talk about the Emperor's Shadow. Okay, this was a bit of a ruse. I have tricked you. I have tricked you all, but basically, the Emperor's Shadows are just a really cool design. There isn't much known about them, but their aesthetic is so interesting that it kind of transcends the boundaries of lacking in lore, because the fan community around 40k has kind of picked them up and adopted them. Now, they haven't really had much done to them in a little while because, well, you'll see, but the reason I truly bring these guys up is kind of a lament about something that I think is neat. Maybe it's just rose-tinted glasses for a past past that I never truly experienced. But you guys remember White Dwarf? Yeah, it was kind of cool, right? I mean, White Dwarf is still around, but what I mean is, you remember old White Dwarf, where it was kind of just a bit better? Less like I was trying to market something to you every second, or at least to my knowledge doing so. I only read them every like couple of months and pick one up from the shop, but like, you know, maybe I do have a bit of a bias here. But back then, there was a lot of how to make things for cheap and how to kit bash and do things that would be non-standard in today's market for like 40K and whatnot. I do kind of miss that because recently I've been going through a lot of old White Dwarf magazines to find some gems to talk about, and there was this segment in White Dwarf number 299, November 2002, I believe it was, where they gave you a guide on how to create your own Space Marine chapter step by step. It was really cool. Like, I genuinely adored how they broke down how to come up with their own paint scheme and lore and just naming conventions and so on. They still do the same thing from time to time. If you look at my Iron Ravens video, that was kind of where they came from, but they were just a bit weirder with it back in the day. So there were the Sons of Jagatai, the Knights of Dorn, and the chapter I kind of want to expand upon here, and that is the Emperor's Shadows. But the big thing was the Emperor's Shadows were modeled almost completely differently from everybody else. The lady who ended up working on it just completely went a bit too above and beyond to the point where I felt kind of bad for everybody else, because like there's actual like green stuff, sculpted parchment that goes over as their chapter logo, and they just have such a unique aesthetic. It's so uniquely sculpted, and there's like hand-designed kanji on their logo. The creator of the scheme, Victoria Lamb, said that she decided to base the initial scheme on the original Black Templar scheme, but swapping out the white bits for red and turquoise, which really do pop on the stark black. The kit bashing involved here is insane, which also, if you're unfamiliar, is not uncommon. Victoria Lamb is actually a multi-Golden Demon winning artist who has been working on Warhammer miniatures for decades. Even up to that point, she had been around for well over a decade or two. Now, she actually owns her own company that goes under her name called Victoria Miniatures. If you don't know much about them, I don't know, go ask Crackduck about her stuff. He actually buys like a lot of her unique guardsman sculpts, and even I have 2 of them. They are all pretty good, I gotta admit, but this sent me down a rabbit hole further to kind of dig into the more creative aspects of old White Dwarf stuff. I don't know, this is a video concept for significantly later, because I do want to have like a large pool of resources. Like in that same book, you know, White Dwarf 299, there was an article about a beer war that was going on between dwarves and goblins, and there was a kit bashing guide on how to make goblin fungus loons or whatever they're called. Basically, they're just goblins dragging barrels of beer or fungus wine. I love it. It's so good. Wait, these are done by Nick Kime? What? Okay. I guess I have some apologies to make, but perhaps it's my nostalgia for a GW gone by that I was never able to participate in. I realize that they have to sell miniatures to do it, and I know that non-standard miniatures are a little bit of a faux pas right now, so I don't know. I like the old style where the miniatures were super open, but they also were a lot cheaper back then, so maybe it's more difficult to market kit bashes. But going back and seeing the creativity on display is very cool. Like, to gush even further about all this, I gotta bring up the fan community, like I mentioned before, as they took the Emperor's Shadows and turned them into this cool-ass feudal marines into, like, this fan-verse. They were a descendant chapter of the Black Templars, as we have no lore of them, but Victoria Lamb said that that was the main point from their construction. There's a bit more to them than that, but I won't really discuss the fan fiction. I just recommend you guys look it up yourself, because they're genuinely worth it. I just think it's cool that they play such a weird part in the lore of the game, because Victoria Lamb is producing some of the best third-party minis out there, and she was included in this small segment all the way back in 2002. Going back to look at it is just so intriguing, but I don't know. Maybe, as I said, I have nostalgia for a time that I was never truly a part of, but what do you all think? I think this dive into the past to see old white dwarves and old lore has has motivated me to do some evil things in the future. But we shall see how this evolves going forward. I think I'll wrap up a bit early now. I have a lot of Arthuring to do. So, special thanks to my channel members. If you want to support the channel, support me and my editors, and make sure that this content keeps coming out, then become a channel member. If you become a member, at minimum, you get access to videos the second they go live, as long as I'm not contractually obligated to not post them. You know, sponsors and whatnot. But if you get the highest tier, you get that and also a bonus video or 2 each month. I try to keep it to 2. Sometimes I hit 3. I'm really trying to get those numbers up because I feel like I've been slacking a bit. But I also increase a level of interactivity with you guys. I've been prepping kind of a members-only Q&A to pop up soon. So, yeah, check that out, I guess. Thank you all once again for watching. Until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful night.